Welcome to Bed Crime Stories Podcast. I'm your host, T. I hope you guys are having a fantabulous Sunday. Today I'm going to talk about the Idaho 4 case and BK, otherwise known as Bryan Kohberger, although we don't want to encourage his notoriety or fame. Let me remind you that if you'd like to support my channel, now's the time to do it. I don't have any ads on, so I'm not making any money off of YouTube. So if you enjoy my work and you want to continue to enjoy my work, please go over to Patreon and sign up for a membership. It would mean so very much to me. While Bryan Kohberger was forced to listen to victim impact statements, 2 other people were in the courtroom, and they too were likely having a very hard time listening to those statements. His sister Amanda and his mother MaryAnn. It had to have taken great courage to walk into that space, knowing that their brother and son Bryan had confessed to the grisly and cruel crimes. Honestly, if I were Amanda, I'd change my last name. After news of BK's arrest, Amanda and her sister Melissa were both fired from their jobs. Collateral damage of their brother's evil acts, which was so unfair to them. But when you're related to the accused, few people seem to give 2 shits. Now, 2 other people from the Kohberger family were noticeably absent from that sentencing hearing: Bryan's older sister Melissa and his father Michael. It's striking that Michael did not attend. From what I've seen and read, Michael Kohberger has tried for years to be there for Bryan. He's the one who braved winter driving conditions across the entire United States to help ensure Bryan got home to Pennsylvania for Christmas of 2022, his last Christmas with his family. Michael Kohberger also helped his son move into his Pullman, Washington apartment when Bryan first arrived to begin his criminology doctoral studies at Washington State University in late June of 2022. We heard from another student who lived in the same apartments, the Steptoe Village apartments, that Bryan's dad spoke to the resident at that time, telling him about Bryan and basically asking for the guy to maybe befriend Bryan because Bryan had trouble making friends, maybe invite him to a party or 2. It looks like Michael's been trying to help his son Bryan for years. Back in the fall of 2012, when Bryan was more than 100 pounds overweight, it was his dad, Michael, who took him to a gym in Broadheadsville, Pennsylvania. The gym was owned by a former pro boxer named Jesse Harris. And Harris sounds like a really nice guy because he agreed to help Bryan shed the weight. Michael basically bartered, offering his HVAC maintenance services in exchange for Bryan's membership and for some gym training. Jesse agreed, and suddenly Bryan started showing up daily for 2 to 3 hour workouts. Michael would drop off Bryan would go inside, he'd keep to himself, and he'd focus on the task at hand. 2 things Bryan Kohberger has are determination and focus. Eventually, Bryan transformed himself from a fat teenager into a very lean guy who would only eat a vegan diet. And in fact, he became so lean and pale that when Bryan later went to DeSales University to study psychology, his new classmates called him the Ghost. Some felt he was spooky. Every day, he'd enter the classroom wearing the same clothes, a wrinkled black button-down shirt, and a tan leather jacket. He'd have his silver laptop in one hand and a Starbucks in the other. And Bryan was a commuter, so he would drive 45 minutes from his home to school and then another 45 minutes each day back home. And he had a job after work as a security guard. So Bryan doesn't come from a family with gold or silver spoons in their mouths. These are people who have to work for a living, work for their education. What I find really fascinating about BK is what at least appears to be a very close relationship with his parents. You'd think a guy like this, who depended so much on his father, even when he was in his late 20s, would not want to do anything to hurt those parents. In fact, the agents who showed up in Pennsylvania and broke down the front door and arrested Bryan said that he later showed concern about his parents and the family dog. But then again, if he really is a psychopath, as some say he is, it's possible he doesn't feel emotional attachment like the rest of us do. And maybe his emotions are shallow, and he knows that he should express concern for his parents and his dog. I do wonder if Michael Kohberger not showing up at the sentencing has more to do with how he feels now about his son after Bryan confessed, or was it simply down to money? We do know that Michael attended an earlier hearing, the one on July 2nd, when Bryan did plead guilty to all 4 murders. One of the benefits of being demonetized by YouTube is that you can say murder. It's actually kind of refreshing. Now, what I'm currently obsessed with is the relationship Bryan has with his mother, MaryAnn. It's been reported that Bryan spends hours and hours each day talking to his mother. Apparently, they're able to video chat, which I suspect is costing the Kohbergers a pretty penny because nothing in jail or prison is free. Those collect calls are on the family. So his mother and father are having to take their hard-earned money and use it to pay for those calls. Now, because I'm nosy, I'd really love to hear those conversations. What are they talking about? Has MaryAnn dared to ask Bryan about the crimes, or does she avoid that topic? Do they have instead surface-level conversations about the weather, about what Bryan needs from the canteen, or what he wants from the canteen? Does he say which books he's reading? There are books in jail and prison. Or is he asking them to send him books like Stephen Stearns does? Is he also asking for candy? No, you know what? He probably would not be asking for candy. Although I have known vegans who eat the vegan diet, but still eat a lot of crappy sweet foods. And don't get me wrong, I love my sweet foods, but I don't claim to be a vegan. It's hard to imagine his mother daring to ask her son questions like, why did you do this? What drove you to commit these atrocious crimes? Explain it to me, Bryan. Make it make sense. I'm curious to know what exactly led Bryan Kohberger, or BK, into turning into a killer who used a very large blade up close and personal on 4 young people who just wanted to live life to its fullest. They wanted to go to school. They wanted to have some fun while they were in school. They wanted to be successful. They wanted to continue loving their parents and their siblings. Technically, BK is a mass murderer, not necessarily a serial killer. To technically be a serial killer, you have to commit multiple crimes like this on different dates, different victims. Well, that's silly. Of course, it would have to be on different victims. However, Dr. Gary Brucato, a clinical psychologist with more than 20 years of clinical experience, seems to lean toward Kohberger having traits consistent with some serial killers. Things like being ego-driven, narcissistic, socially isolated and awkward, having a need for control, lacking emotional attachment. A lot of these dangerous nut jobs have serious mother issues as well, and a lot of them have had childhood trauma and or abuse. In fact, this stuff is often cited as a potential contributing factor to their development of violent tendencies. For example, there's Edmund Kemper. His mother was described as dominating and belittling. She subjected Edmund to frequent verbal and emotional abuse, and in fact, one of Kemper's victims was his mother. Then there's Ted Bundy. Bundy is said to have experienced early childhood neglect and possible abuse from his grandfather, who was initially presented to Ted as his father. Basically, Ted was mind-effed because he was led to believe that his mother, Eleanor Louise, was his older sister, to avoid the stigma of her having an out-of-wedlock child in the 1940s. Supposedly, Bundy didn't find out until he was a teenager. And you can only imagine how mind-blowing that news would be. Hey, Ted, well, I'm actually not your sister, I'm your mom. Then there's serial killer Henry Lee Lucas. He was reportedly physically abused by his mother. Supposedly, his mommy dearest forced him to cross-dress and also had him witnessing certain sexual activities. And guess what? Henry paid her back later by killing her. So now I'm wondering, what is MaryAnn Kohberger really like? Was she a domineering mother or not? Or was Kohberger abused by somebody else in his childhood? Or did he become violent like this strictly because of the bullying and also the rejection that he's faced at the hands of pretty young women? I don't think a person becomes capable of doing what Kohberger did to Kaylee Gonsalves, Xana Kernodle, Ethan Chapin, and Madison Mogen just because of bullying and rejection. I think there has to be something else. Something triggered this brutal behavior. And was it strictly due to outside forces, meaning outside of the family? Or did something go down inside the family? Or was there a certain type of dynamic in the Kohberger home that could have at least contributed to Bryan becoming this violent? And what is with MaryAnn Kohberger? Is she simply a loving mother who cannot stop caring about her son despite the heinous crimes he's confessed to and shown no remorse for? I mean, his attitude in court, according to people who were there, was that there was no emotion other than he got angry. They could see like rage in his eyes. Doesn't his mother see that as well? Do you think she maybe would have coached him to say, Bryan, try to show some tenderness or emotion or remorse when you're listening to this? Or is he just beyond her control? I can't help thinking that MaryAnn Kohberger might be similar to Brian Laundrie's mom, Stephen Stern's mom, moms who seem to refuse to see and admit to the violence that their sons have inflicted on innocent victims. In James Patterson and Vicky Ward's new book about the Idaho 4 case, they write that Bryan used to complain to his friend Jack Bayless about life on, quote, broke Bachelor Mountain, and he described himself as a, quote, good Catholic university student, full homo. According to the authors, Bryan was a virgin who hates women. So they make it sound like he has never been with a female, and he's a virgin who hates women. They also say that he coped with his loneliness by immersing himself in video games, by going for night drives for real, and by visiting the gun range. Now, apparently, Bryan's bedroom in the Kohberger home is in the basement, and that is where he presumably let out his true feelings on Tapatalk and SoundCloud. He wrote, recorded, and posted his original rap song, which he made for other sufferers of visual snow, that neurological condition that is the visual equivalent of TV static. Now, after he got in trouble for stealing his sister's phone and selling it in order to get heroin, yes, this guy has been to rehab. I mean, if you think about it, he's kind of a hot mess. Definitely a hot mess. At one point, his mother wanted him to go to Bible study with her. She thought maybe it could fix him, and apparently Bryan went a couple of times. Just so you know, MaryAnn is a teacher. She worked in the local school district where Bryan went to school. A lot of people say MaryAnn's a very nice lady, and we can't always blame the parents for what happens to their children. There isn't always a connection there. Now, in this book by James Patterson, there's a chapter that says, in the summer of 2024, the mother of one of Kohberger's friends, Jeremy Saba, who actually died, ran into Michael Kohberger at a Rite Aid. The mother asked Michael, "How are you?" He seemed very pleased to talk to her. She said to him, "My heart goes out to MaryAnn. How is she?" Michael told this woman that his wife doesn't talk to anyone, even on the phone. Michael said, quote, "We lead a very quiet life. We don't go out. And even when they are home," he says, "they don't feel safe. People," he tells the lady, "are watching our house." Michael says government people. And then Michael, according to this book, says to this woman, "You know Bryan didn't do it, right?" Michael Kohberger expresses condolences for the death of Jeremy. He died from drugs. And Michael says to this lady, Bryan wasn't the same after the drugs. He wasn't the same person. Michael goes on to say, but Bryan was framed. Somebody planted the knife sheath. The police didn't find it when they first went in. So basically, Michael seemed to be echoing everything that Bryan had said earlier, that he didn't do it. He was going to try to pin the crime on other people. He was trying to say that he was out night driving to look at the stars. So it's interesting. At that time, Michael believed that Bryan was innocent. Now he's confessed to the crime. So you have to wonder, did Michael not turn up because he couldn't look at the truth that his son confessed? MaryAnn was there, but she was wearing her sunglasses. She was kind of trying to hide, and I don't blame her. I would be doing the same thing. I'm going to leave it there for today. Please like, share, and subscribe. That's a free way you can help me. And again, if you would consider a Patreon membership, I'd really appreciate it. See you next time. I love you guys.